Good. I was in Colorado last week and I made a date to have dinner with Mary Madison, who lives in Colorado, so that I could learn all about her and get a really great introduction. And it didn't work out. And so we had breakfast this morning, and I'm kind of relieved because within, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, she completely blew my mind with all of the amazing things she's done and all of the amazing things she's planning to do. She's a mere 82, which means she'll have a lifetime membership. And I told her at the end, she needs to plan to live a really long time because the range of things she's done is just astounding. She's got 3 on her way to the 4th degree, which includes things like industrial design, veterinary medicine. Now she's designing looms and other products for people who have lost limbs in wars and things like that. And after telling me all these amazing things, she said, but the most important thing in her life is her daughter, who is absolutely stellar. And I said, oh, how old is your daughter? And she said, what, 52? 62. So it is my privilege and honor to have met and to introduce to you Mary Madison, whose book I've already read. And Mary, come on up and dazzle everybody. Thank you all so much for your interest. First, a shout out to my daughter. She couldn't be here today, so she gave me a necklace that says, "Mother, daughter, I love you." And it's given me a guilt trip because when she was 15, I was certain that I was just going to kill her and be done. So it worked out. Yeah. So thank you. I'm a self-taught weaver. My first loom was a 4-shaft Leclerc jack loom. I had to learn that. I did not know what I had. And it came with all of this stuff. Okay. I had no idea what that was either. 2 of the sticks on the floor had 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 on it. I figured that meant something. So I used those 2 just to figure out what was going on. The owner had started putting threads through those little holes. So I followed that pattern. I did not know that the box of stuff was what you needed to add to the loom. So I tied the threads onto the bar that came over the front thing. Then I was wondering, how the heck did you weave with that? So I had to take all of that apart and find that the sticks that held the reed, and then how to attach that. So I figured that all out. This takes about 2 or 3 years. So I'm really proficient at twill. So you know how you get one of those days where everything is going just right. You've got your selvage, you've got your tension, and the pattern is remembered. So it just kind of goes. And that was the day that I wondered if a slave person could have felt that kind of contentment in weaving, not having any control over what you did, how you did it, and your life not very, very accommodating. But I knew that there was a peace and there was a contentment that comes with weaving. And I had hoped that that would have been a possibility for her. Just as an aside, I came down with an allergic reaction to a medicine about 3 weeks ago. And that allergic medicine they gave me had an allergic reaction. So I'm in an emergency room And I'm saying to these 6 doctors, I have to be on a plane next week. So figure it out. All right, so I'm on the plane, but I feel like I'm at a slight tilt, and I can't tell whether I'm yelling or whispering. So if I go down too low, just kind of get my attention. Okay. So I'll stick to the notes because otherwise I'll ramble. So I get this idea that we really do not know very much about slavery in a practical sense. We know that there's cotton, that there's the Civil War, all of those things, but for all practical purposes, how do I get this to it? Can someone get me to the first slide? That's not so I broke it.
Thank you, people.
So I came across this picture, and it says family with servants. Okay. So that was my first clue that we're still having difficulty talking about slavery. She was a slave. She wasn't a servant. She wasn't paid.
Okay.
So I needed to do this book for me on the assumption that there were no illusions. I wanted to get to the raw truth. Okay. So my first search was to find information about plantations. And I went to little towns, little hole-in-the-wall museums, and I found things that said, believed to have been woven by a slave. And I thought, okay, that works. I found the papers of families that were in archives in universities. I found an interesting one that said, a community college course taught by the Sons of the Confederates in North Carolina had concluded that 70% of the slaves were satisfied with their lives in captivity. So I knew I needed to do more research. So I began checking personal family records, graphic recordings, and one of the things that came up for me was the raw brutality of what was in private journals, what was in family histories. One passage I found spoke about a slave woman who had talked back to her mistress, and she took her baby and gave it to a group that was marching slaves down to the south. Another instance was in great detail about whippings. This woman was, of course, stripped naked, and she was whipped in her genitals. Another account was cutting off her breast. So this was just new information for me, and I just remember feeling hurt. I wasn't angry. I wasn't disgusted. I was just truly hurt to the heart. I packed up all of this stuff, including the pencils, the papers, pens, and I put it in the basement. I did not want to see, hear, or speak to a white person. And at that time, I probably made of value judgment that white women in particular were complicit. So, of course, more research, and I find that they had fewer choices than the Black people, than the slaves. So most of the time, these were young women, the mistresses, first time away from home. You were on a forest land, 2,000 acres. You're away from town, you're away from your people, and you're just trying to muddle through. I had thought that some of the passages explaining and talking about the involvement of white women was the 1845 version of slumming. I apologize to women from 1845. I now know better. But I could not believe that there could be genuine relationships between women, slave women, and white women who had all of the privileges that these women did not have. But it was an illusion. It was an illusion. It was not real. And I came to appreciate that more as I researched and found personal accounts of relationships between people. So one of the slave pictures that I came across was almost an exact duplicate of my Aunt Bessie. There, okay. So it wasn't real to me dealing with slavery because it was about a different time and these were not people I knew. But this woman looked like my aunt. And that's what made me want to at least acknowledge the effort and the trauma that they went through. And my thinking was at the time, I don't want to have anything to do with this, but if they could live through it, then certainly I could write through it. So that became sort of my focus. So with this new resolve, I decided to just take a philosophical approach to it. And I had not realized that this was not a Southern peculiarity. This was a global market. It had global implications. So in the 1820 census, there were 70,000 slaves in Louisiana and 32,000 in Mississippi. By the 1960 census, there were 331,000 slaves in Louisiana and 436,000 in Mississippi. They were shipping out something like 684 million pounds of cotton. So that was a fairly substantial amount of cotton. These are steamboats loaded up to the Mississippi River on the way to England. So it's a major business. And with the international trade, of course, it became important to have more workers and more land. So I don't know if you know, but cotton depletes the land. So you have to be constantly planting in new lands, which was the basis of the expansion in the United States into the southern countries. And of course, with that, there was concern about needing to import so many more slaves because it's a labor-intensive activity, as you can imagine. Okay. But not all of the farmers were plantation people. Most of the farmers were small farmers. They had 10 slaves. The huge plantations may have 300, 900, and they're working and planting thousands and thousands of acres of cotton to fill the European market. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was some concern by white farmers, as you might imagine, the small farmers. So there was an article published in 1859, and this white farmer wrote, "Slavery was ruinous to the whites. It retards improvements, it roots out our industrious population, diminishes yeomanry from our country, and deprives the spinner, weaver, smith, shoemaker of employment and support." Okay. So slavery ended in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution for December 6th of 1865. But get this, it wasn't until February of 2013 that the 13th Amendment was ratified in Mississippi. So theoretically, slavery was still legal in Mississippi until that time. So I thought that was an interesting thing. So fast forward to the Depression years. And there were programs for unemployed writers to give them some income. There was a program designed for Negro writers, but they never hired them. And they never gave them the work that they were trying to do. It wasn't until 1993 that this data was collected. Zora Neale Hurston was one of the people that completed interviews that were collected into this compilation. So it's in the Library of Congress now, and it is, what's the word? It's digitized so that you can go through any of it. There are about 10,000 pages of text and about 2,000 photographs. That's what I use to pull from these narratives. And they covered a wide range of everyday accounts of what happens on a plantation. Okay. So I've tried to group them in ways of understanding the activities. So I'll use the actual narrative of the individual slave. And this person is talking about how the focus is on production, and that's the sole purpose of it. You use anything and everything to keep up the production. This is Cato Carter. I used to tend to the nursling thread. When the slave women were confined with babies, having to suck, and they were too little to take to the field, the memories had to spin. I would take them the thread and bring back to the house what was spun. Bob Potter, we had a little basket of cotton and had to pick the seeds out of it before going to bed. Clay Reeves, the only thing my mother done before freedom was work on the weaving. She had a loom in her kitchen. I used to lay under it. It was warm in there. There were often buildings that were designed and set aside specifically for carding, spinning, and weaving. This is an account of Jenny Woodbury. Patience would work at the loom house. She do all the weaving. She made every kind of pretty streak in the cloth out of the yarn and dye right there on the plantation. They would go get things from the woods like walnut to make brown and cedar and sweet gum to make purple. Then they make the blue cloth out of that thing rised up over here called indigo. There's some of that in the grove indigo that still grows on Sand Hill this day, but ain't nobody worried about it. Another slave, Tempe Hendren, there was a big weaving room where the blankets was wove. The head weaver looked after all of the weaving of the fancy blankets. This is a weaving house, a loom house on the Prescott Plantation. Oftentimes, the mistress of the plantation would weave with them. And this was where I got the notion that they were kind of slumming. But it was certainly more than that. This person is explained. Miss Betsy was a good weaver too. She weaved the same as the niggers. She says she loved the clacking sound of the loom and the way the shuttles run in and out, carrying a long tail of bright-colored cloth. These days, she sat at the loom all morning, pedaling with her feet and her white hands flittering over the bobbin. The plantations would also try to bring in new inventions and new tools that would increase productivity. So this is a cotton press. So Ann Hawthorne says, there was a gin and cotton press on the place. Old Master Gin and Bell, he owned cotton. That old press had them long arms sticking down, what they hitched to horses to make them go round and round. So Neil Upson, a slave from Georgia, he had this to say in his narrative. They had some gin in them days, what had treadmills for the mules to walk in. Them old treadmills looked sort of like stairs, but most of them gins was turned by long poles what the mules pulled. You had to feed the cotton by hand to them gins, and you sure had to be careful, or you was going to lose a hand and maybe an arm. You had to jump in them old cotton presses and tread the cotton down by hand. It took most of the day to gin 2 bales of cotton. So women worked in the field the same as men. There were all kinds of work on a large plantation, as you might imagine. So some effort was made to specialize the work and to focus groups of slaves on one task. So George Fleming's notes, they didn't do much spinning and weaving in the home quarters. Most of it was done in one special place master made for that purpose. Some of the slaves didn't do nothing but spin and weave. They sure enough was good at it. They was trained just for that particular work. Jane Harmon says, my mom was a spinner and weaver, and she spun and wove things to be sent to the soldiers in the war. I remember her saying the spinning, that was for the soldiers. Okay. My old master trained the smartest niggers to do certain kinds of work. My mother was a good weaver. She wove all the clothes for her family and bossed the weaving of other weavers on the plantation. I'm sorry, my head is just ringing in vacuum here, so I don't know how I sound. You sound fine. Okay, good. So Ned Walker of South Carolina, I thought this was an interesting observation. One day, Master David bought 1,385 acres on Watery Creek. After the war, him fixed it up so slaves could stay together, buy a place, and its common tenants on an installment plan. He sent word for the head of each family to come to Winnsboro. Us have to have names and register. This is following the closure of the war. That was a great day. My daddy already had his name, Tommy. He was the driver of the buggy, the carriage, and one of the wagons during slavery times. Master Henry told him, he wrote his name on a slip of paper and said, Tom, you have never walked a day in your life. I'm going to call you Walker. So some of the other names were amusing. And he says, I give you the name of a judge, Dan. I give you a Roman name, Pompey. We'll give Uncle Sam the name Shadrach. And when he reached Uncle Alex, he says, I'll give you a preacher and a scholar's name. So your name is Porter Ramsey. So there were indigenous people in the South during this time, but I only found 2 references to interactions between slaves and the Indian population at that time. So there's one that really impressed me, and it's a bit long, but it tells a story. And I think it's important to understand that there were some Indians who kept slaves, but they were not part of the larger plantation activities or never involved in having more than 5 or 10 slaves, okay? So this is Cheney Richardson from Oklahoma. She says, Mammy worked at the big house and took me along every day. When I was a little bigger, I would help her hold the hank. She done the spinning, and the old mistress done a lot of weaving and knitting. When we weaved the cloth, we used the big loom out in the gallery. Miss Nancy tell us how to do it. When I was about 10 years old, the feud got so bad, the Indians were always talking about getting the horses and cattle killed and their slaves home. I was too little to know how bad it was until one morning, my own mammy went off somewhere down the road to get some stuff to dye cloth with. She didn't come back. Lots of the young Indian bucks on both sides of the feud would ride around the weeds at night, and old master got powerful uneasy about my mammy and had the neighbor slaves out looking for her. But nobody could find her. It was about a week later that 2 Indian men ride up and asked old master, wasn't his gal Ruth gone? He said, yes. They take one of the slaves along with the wagon to show where she had seen her. They find her in some bushes. She's been getting bark to set the dyes. She had been dead all the time. Somebody done hit her in the head with a club and shot her through with a bullet. Old master nearly go crazy. He's so mad. The young Cherokee men ride the woods every night for about a month, but they never catch who done it. I think old master sell her children and give them out to someone then, because I never see my sisters and brother for a long time until after the war. I had to go live with a new mistress. She was a Cherokee neighbor. Her name was Hannah Ross, and she raised me until I was grown. I was her home girl, and she and me done a lot of spinning and weaving. I can remember weaving with Miss Hannah Ross. She would weave a strip of white and one of yellow and one of brown to make it pretty. She had a reel that would pop every time it got to a half skein, so she would know to stop and fill it up again. No, I don't. We used the copperas and some kind of bark she bought at the store. It was cotton clothes for winter and summer, and slaves too, I tell you. I had been a good churchgoer all of my life until I get too feeble. I still understand and talk Cherokee language and love to hear songs and parts of the Bible in it because it makes me happy to think about when I was a little girl before my mammy and pappy leave me. So this is what James Mellon, a historian, has to say in a book he wrote about Woolworth days. Grievances abound, but there is little whimpering. The testimonies of these volatile survivors stands forever as a testament, thundering affirmation to life, regardless of the conditions under which it is lived. I wove the tapestry shortly after I finished the book, and it always seems to be part of it. I cut it out of the frame at the airport because I was afraid they wouldn't let me bring it on, so it looks a little tacky now. Okay. But it is my representation of Psalms 30, verse 5. And it says, weeping may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. And that is the heartfelt part of what I left all of these stories with. There was no sense of deep-seated, rooted anger. There was just a sense that we endured, we got through it, we leave other people who are stronger. And that kind of gave me a feeling of there's something to be appreciated about these narratives because they're from the heart. A lot of scholars will dismiss it because they think that it is recollections or it might not be truthful or it might not be accurate. But it tells their story and it gives you a sense of what was actually going on in real time on these plantations and with real people. So I've taken this part out and put it back a couple of times, but at 82, you kind of lose your filters. So I just want to say, in these political times, it's easy to temper your speech, your objections, your concerns. But I think that it has to be done in the context of truth and justice. And that sounds, I know, stilted. But once you read these people's account of what actually happened, it feels to me like a betrayal if I don't speak my truth and take this issue. So I've been pleasantly surprised at the level of interest in the book. I've had messages from people in Australia, Germany, Ireland, all over England. And it's been heartwarming that they want to understand what actually happened and how important it was. Okay. So that's pretty much what I have to say. I would say that this is a sample of the piece that I wove. And let me tell you, overshot is not easy. It is not, okay? This is a convention of former slaves. I don't know that the organization is still going on, but this was in like early 1930s. And these were actual slave women. Okay? So I see this picture of Abraham Lincoln at Antietam, and I recognize, you won't be able to see it in this slide, but it is a pattern of a piece of weaving that I had seen in a North Carolina little hole in the wall museum. And it said that this was woven by a slave. So I thought, of course I have to weave that. So Handwoven Magazine did an article on overshot. And they had a pattern. Someone had painstakingly, deciphered the pattern and came up with the actual plan of it. And I wove it. So you'll see it out on the table there. There's this huge line that shouldn't be there. Okay. But I enjoyed it, and I felt some kind of tug on the heartstring in being able to do that. So that was fun to do. That's it. Do you have any questions? Yes. Okay.
Sorry for being first. I promise this will be my only question. So I love it that you talked about all the places you're getting a response about the book from the other countries and all that. Have you had much response from Black people in the United States, from African Americans?
Yes, yes. In the countries where they purchased my book, it's been as far as Australia, Japan. I didn't even know Japanese people knew that we had slavery, but there's an interest. England, Germany, Ireland, a lot of interest from scholars, Black scholars at Black universities, because I had been able to uncover from my research in personal journals information they had not had access to. So that was a very satisfying thing. So one of the scholars, Yolanda Sanders of Iowa University, she gave me her research paper on textile making for slave cloth. Who knew? But evidently there was a large industry of cheap yarn and fiber that was woven into fabric and processed by the mills in New England to be shipped over to England. Okay. So it became such a popular thing and so successful that it impacted the linen industry and threw that all out of kilter. So supposedly there's a monument in Ireland somewhere that is showing the fact that cotton was brought over and they were able to increase their productivity and their wealth because of all of the cotton that was coming from the United States. So I did not have any idea that it had been such a global market. So my own supposition was that with it being a global market and impacting wealth and profit, that's what caused us to be able to push aside the morality issue And that's not unlike today. You talk about profits and wealth, and some things just kind of are pushed to the back, okay? So it's part of my belief that issues of slavery in America have not fully been dealt with. We've been messing around with this for 250 years, but we're dealing with it from the context of civil rights, law, things like that. We haven't really dealt with what happened to human beings and that these were human beings. So my theory is that we've managed somehow to separate that out, and we're just dealing with the business side of it. So underneath there is, I think, for Black and brown people, this sense of anger that just sits there. And for white people, there is this sense of guilt that just sits there. And that creates an insulation so that we don't deal with and process the human factor. And I think that we just keep turning. When it's convenient to think about it in the context of profit, wealth, loss, who's in charge, who's making money, who's not, there is a way to disassociate the humanity part of it. And I hope that in the context of something that we all love and appreciate, fiber, fabrics, art, that when we're faced with an honest conversation about who and what we are, we can stand in the strength of that artwork and that commonality and process some of this stuff so that we don't have to keep dealing with it. I'm tired of it. I'm just sick of it. Every so often, someone will ask me about growing up in West Virginia. My first memory is that there was a brick and mortar school with indoor plumbing at the bottom of the hill where I lived. But I was bused off 20 miles to go to a shack. Okay. So that's my reality. So when you're talking about profit and loss, who's on top? That doesn't really make sense to me. Let's figure out how we can have honest conversations and be done with this crap. Yes.
Where's the question? Oh. About
Yes.
and did any of the slave owners have a thing to say about the relationships that they formed with the women they lived alongside?
Yes, there are several. Let me see if I can find one. Well, I'll just tell you. There are personal accounts and family journals that are not part of universities. And they talk about how lonely a person was. Keep in mind, these are maybe 15-year-old women who've been away from home for the first time. And they're out in the middle of a forest, and there's nobody really around except, 300 maybe Black slaves. So they formed a bond through the weaving and through the spinning and through all the other work that it takes to run this farm. And I think they were genuine. Same thing as I found references to people who had grown up with mammies. They were the caretakers, and there was genuine love between these Black women and these white babies and these white children. It wasn't a matter of obligation. It was a matter of, this is a human being. This is a child. This is not unlike my child who needs care and loving. And they gave it freely, evenly, with full intention. So the family stories were more easy to come by in terms of what I think was genuine honesty about what was going on at the time, rather than university presentations. Because there was a tendency when the universities do, some university professors, they try to clean it up, like when they talk about slaves who were servants. They weren't servants, they're slaves, okay? And they would discredit their recollections and their memories. But there was a lot of truthfulness and historical utility, because these slaves could identify who the first wife was, who the second wife was, who the fathers were, who the cousins were. And there was a genealogy that was available to you that was not in any other place, any other record kept. They also talked about who had a second wife, or who had a mistress, and who was the product of that. So there were ways that you could kind of figure out who your cousins were and this kind of thing. It was also a source of identifying which slave family was associated with which group of owners. And those were relationships that even today have value, because, you might come across a family within the same name as yours, but they're white, that does not necessarily indicate ownership. It also recognizes bloodship, okay? So one of the stories I read, because keep in mind at this time, if there were a mixed race child, the mother was obviously Black. There were no mothers who were white, okay? So this caused a problem for the mistress. Oftentimes, though, someone would intercede and the child was brought to the big house and raised in the big house, okay? That was kind of a blessing, but it gave rise to the theory about lighter complected Black people being more intelligent and more valuable than darker complected Blacks. And God knows I'm sympathetic to that. Half of my family is white. But there are repercussions of that where we're still living with and sorting through this crap today. And it's unfortunate that we're returning, recycling this kind of stuff. But it's there. I'm not going to solve it today. Other questions?
Well, I'm just going to shout it out. Is there any evidence of this being passed down, this reading, that because, sometimes generations kind of follow the traditions or the occupations of their forebearers. So when slavery ended, were these slave weavers then able to find gainful employment as weavers?
No, go ahead.
Most of the weavers that were enslaved left the plantation without food, so they didn't have access to But the majority of the HBCUs, the historical Black colleges that were created at the beginning of the century, weaving was a Black. There are photographs of the but yeah, the college.
So there was an appreciation for weaving and spinning in that context. But I would say for most of the narratives that I found, they did not want to be associated with that as a stigma. They needed to move on, to progress beyond that. Okay? And it was like there was sort of a stigma that if you wove or if you did things with your hands, it was probably because you couldn't do anything intellectually. So there was a drive to better yourself, to move beyond some of those things. I don't mind telling you that was a major part of my thinking for a long time. I was just driven to be the best, to get the education, to try the things that people assumed Black women could not do. I spent a fair amount of my time and energy on that crap. Again, getting older, you lose filters. You know, I don't have anyone telling me kind of what to do. When I visit my doctors, they'll say to me, I think you should take this medicine. Okay, let's discuss that. You have to convince me that I need to do this. Okay? My daughter says that I'm stubborn anyway, so.
Sorry. This question comes from online, from Regina Louise-Wheaton. As an archivist, I'm excited to hear that you were able to do research in personal papers. Can you advise others how you were able to find and use archival holdings as a researcher?
Yes. I purposely devoted a fair amount of my research intelligence to being able to help you if you wanted to go further. Okay. Now keep in mind, my thinking was, people aren't interested in that, obviously. So I didn't expect it to be a bestseller. That wasn't my goal. I wanted to have a source for those people who might be interested and would go further with it. So I have a section on references for what I used, but then I have a section for what I call a textile bibliography that gives more detail about actual weaving, in case they're new and they don't know what a loom is, as I did. And then there are suggestions for further reading that I think is a valid source, not fluff, not apologetic, but just raw data for what you need to understand for what was going on in the world in that context. Okay, and I think it's pretty useful. I've had several people respond that they've read the book or they've done the research and it was helpful. Others? Oh, I'm answering and giving you what you want. Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about, recently,
Is it working? There it is.
I wanted to ask about, if you have come across anything that speaks to the weaving tradition from Africa, from Ghana with the kente cloths, or any of the traditions that might have come over with the slaves.
Yes.
I'd love to know what you found about that.
So I don't remember right offhand which one of the narratives speaks to that, but there are several narratives that talk about what they learned from other slaves who had come over. there was one account, and he said the ship docked in the harbor. They offered red and blue scarves for people to come on board, and we never see them again. They were on a slave ship bound for America. And some people talk about how they never saw their families again, and how they remembered things of Africa, and they tried to incorporate that into their lives so that they wouldn't forget it. Okay. Keep in mind, you don't have a lot of leeway in terms of what you weave and how you weave it and things like that. But I read several accounts that spoke about, it's sort of like the good nigger. So to reward them, you would give them a loom that they would have in their kitchen, and they could have scraps of yarns and threads and weave for themselves. Okay. No, go ahead. Dick.
Let me get to you so they can hear you on the too loud. Oh, yeah.
In Africa, we were doing it. If they lost it, so low money. And the men that came here would put it in the field. So a lot of it was lost.
You know, we weren't being solicited for our talent in weaving. So we just wanted you to pick the cotton. But I do think that there was, in some of the readings, there was a remembrance of their lives before they were snatched away. And that sustained a lot of people.
Yeah, we wanted to know if you had books here. I hadn't seen that you have books here.
Yes, outside, here on the table. And there are also samples of my weaving. So don't be too critical of it. I was just sort of teaching myself and kind of muddling through. When I teach students now, I say to them, that is not a creative design. That is a mistake. Unweave it. So when I say unweave it, it has a softer term than pull it out.
It's a little after 2, and microphone. What? Microphone, right? People online. We are, wait, this is break time, right? Yeah. This has been great. This has been really wonderful.